after work. It's been a very nice day. I've just come into the shed and it was 38 degrees C, so I have the doors open and I'm not sure I'm going to get much done, but I'm just trying to figure out where I'm up to. So one new thing is I am filming this on a new toy I got myself. I decided to finally splash out and get a GoPro camera. I've been filming everything on my phone and the phone's getting a little bit old, a little bit broken, so I thought, oh, let's invest in a decent camera. And I'm just still trying to figure out all of the settings on it and what the best angles to use are and the best settings and that kind of thing, but it seems to work pretty well. I have played with other little action cams before, but the video quality on the last one I got was pretty good, definitely usable, but the sound quality was terrible. So just seeing how this will go. I got somewhat distracted. Normally you would just plug a USB cable into it to transfer the pictures off, and I kind of ended up playing with it a bit to figure out if I could connect to it via Wi-Fi and download the films wirelessly. And it turns out you can, but I went down a whole rabbit hole to do with writing a Windows application on my desktop computer to use Bluetooth to connect to the GoPro camera to get it to enable its Wi-Fi access point, so you can then connect to it via your Wi-Fi and get access to the files. It was a fun little diversion, but it's probably just easier to plug in a USB cable, to be honest, because you have to open it up to change the batteries anyway. So that was a little bit of a distraction. And another thing I've done, which I'm very pleased about today, is I converted our old blown up range hood into a Extractor fan. Basically the electronic controller on this had blown up when the power lines went down the road, and all I've done, I'll turn it off, is I fitted a 4-position panel switch. It's a 3-speed fan, and that's just connected directly to the motor. So I'm hoping that'll give me a lot more airflow through and help cool things down. And the other reason I wanted it is I want to be able to fit some sort of filter to the front of it, and when I do any spray painting and set up a temporary spray booth, use it as an extractor. So I need to figure out what sort of filter material I can get to go on there. I think in the States, where they have a lot of furnaces, you can get filter material for those, but we don't really have those in New Zealand, so I don't know if there's an equivalent. So I'll have to think of something. I also got some parts delivered, which was all of these brass fittings, and I'm going to use these for some of the fuel fittings and also for the fuel tank pickups. And I know I had a plan when I ordered these about how I was going to do it, and I've completely forgotten what that was, so I need to look at it again. I think it had something to do with using these screwed into the top of the tank, I believe. So these would have pickup tubes soldered into them, 2 different lengths, so I get the reserve feature, and they would screw into the top of the tank. And on this side I would use a fitting a bit like this with an olive. So I've got some screw-in ones of those still, and that would be the connection to the hard line. I think that's how that was going to work. What else? I think that's kind of it on the car at the moment. So the next thing to do is make the petrol tank, and I'm not going to sit here and hammer steel today. It's going to be too hot for that. But what I might do is, this is the steel sheet I'm using, which is how they spec the petrol tank needs to be in the car constructor's manual. So it's 1.2mm Zintek steel. And what I will do is cut some pieces out of that and start cutting out the blanks to make the end caps and the baffle that goes inside the tank. I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the filler tube and the filler neck, but obviously I can add those later. So I think that's it for this film. Like I say, I'm still trying to get used to this camera and the different angles and the different settings that it has. I'm working on the rear part of the undertray, and what I've done is made a rough cardboard template. One of the reasons I always have a big pile of cardboard boxes sitting in the background is because I keep all the cardboard. It's really handy for making templates and bits and pieces like this. What I usually end up doing is, this was a moving box that I cut up. It's quite thick cardboard, and then to stop it flopping around I cut off little extra pieces and then hot glue them all together. You might be able to see here sort of pieces glued on to make one big piece of cardboard, and then I can use that as templates. I have looked at buying sheets of cardboard from the stationery shops or the art shops, but it's so expensive, it's just not worth it. So that's my excuse for having so many beer boxes lying around. I only buy them for the cardboard, obviously, which means that isn't a beer fridge, that's actually a part of my cardboard recycling centre. But this piece is working pretty well because it's quite a big template. It needs to be quite rigid, so the big thick cardboard box is working well. You can see with the axle basically at full droop, it's basically sitting on the chassis. There's little rubber pads in there, so that shows how far down the rear of the diff will go through the floor, basically. And you can see it just kind of pokes through. So given I need an access hole there anyway to get to the diff drain plug, I think what I'll do is I will make a circular hole as I've got there, cut into the bottom to give me the clearance around everything, and I will make a separate piece of aluminium. What I'm going to try to do is make a circular piece that's dished, but with a flange on the outside, and I think I will try to weld nuts to the top of it. So I'm not sure if that, I guess I can make that little dish out of thin steel rather than aluminium. I can weld little nuts to it so the dish lives inside the car, if that makes sense. So you fit it from the inside, but then the nuts are effectively captive, so you can put little screws in from underneath. I think that'll be the easiest way, because then when you're changing the diff oil, you just need to get underneath, undo those 4 bolts or 4 screws, and then move that cover out of the way, and then you can get to the drain plug. And the other advantage of having a little dished cover like that is I'll be able to see how much diff oil leaks. It does drip a little bit. I've worked out it's actually coming up up through these bolts, so it weeps just a tiny amount, just enough to be annoying. So I think the next step will be drop this cardboard down, trace it out onto a piece of aluminium over there, and then cut it out with a jigsaw. It's another very hot day, and I've modified my fan. I put a little wooden base on it so I can actually hold it up vertically, and I've got it blowing air in just to get airflow, which helps cool things down. So I think that should be fine. And there aren't too many things that I need cutouts for on this rear section of undertray. Just the bolt heads for that cross member that holds the fuel tank, and a few around the rivet holes. Possibly I don't need those actually, because there's already the other piece of under tray there. This will go on top of that, effectively. It'll just sit on top of it, and I will probably put a joggle in it so that it sits on top and then folds up so it's flush with the chassis rails. And then I'm not going to need very many bolts, screws to hold this in place, because there's no weight on it. It doesn't need a lot to hold it. You can see also how these cross members all clear it. Everything sits above the under tray, which is good. Once again, the place looks like a complete disaster zone, especially under and around the car. I have been working on the rear part of the under tray. That's almost ready to go on now. You may notice the hole under the diff got bigger and bigger and bigger as I had to slowly enlarge in it to give it more clearance and give it enough clearance that I can place a piece in from the top. So it sort of goes in and sits in. So you have to allow a little bit of clearance for that as well. It's got holes there for the bolts and the rivets. It's got the little joggle at the bottom edge so that this piece of floor will come along and then go down and sit on top of the middle piece. Ideally, I would have liked it the other way around, where this piece kind of stepped back like that, stepped down like that, and then this piece slid underneath it. Just because then the direction of the gap is opposite to the direction you're traveling in, if you get what I mean. But we're talking about a 1.6mm sheet of aluminium that's going to be bolted pretty tight to the other one. So the fact that the rear piece is over the top of the front piece, I don't think it's really going to matter. If I'm really worried, I'll put a little strip of foam, very thin strip of foam or felt or something, rubber, along that edge, and that'll just help seal that up. And I did put a little curve on the back of it to match the curve on the rear cross member. I've got my slip rollers out, but I didn't do it the way you would expect to do it on these, because this is such a short little curve. You can't really put them through the rollers and get that curve on them. So what I did is used it as a hammer form, and I actually put this through from the back so that it was so that just the piece I wanted to curl around was sticking through the front here, tightened it down, and then just hammered that edge over, and that got me that nice tight radius. This happens to be pretty much exactly the same diameter as the tube on the back, so that works really well. And what I've just been doing underneath the car, which is tricky when you've not got much ground clearance, is just drilling the bolt holes. So there's 6 little bolts either side that's going to hold the under tray in place. What I will have to do now is, hopefully this is the last time this goes on and off for building it, but now I will put it back in place, and then I will scribe through those holes I've drilled in the chassis onto the aluminium, take it off again, drill those holes, and then I know those bolts will go through in exactly the right place. I think that's the easiest way to do that, but it means making something like this piece has taken me all day, because it's on and off the car, and you have to measure things, and you make things oversized, and then you trim it a little bit, put it back on the car, see where you're off, measure it, trim a little bit more. And of course this is my first time doing all of this, so maybe if somebody knows what they're doing, it's not such a big job, but I'm guessing I've got a week's work easy in all of the under trays for this. That's just the flat under trays, so it's a lot of work. So the rear under tray is all in place, bolted on. So there's bolts down there, one there, one there. Oh, it gets bolted along here. I need to make little spaces to go underneath this cross member, same height as the chassis, well, same thickness as the chassis, just to space those out. And then another one there and there, and I've curved the back to match the curve off the chassis rails. That all looks good. screws is loose, so they're all just finger tight at the moment. I did have to rerun the drill bit through one of the holes because it was a little bit off, but not far. So that's what that looks like. You can see why you need quite a big hole for the diff clearance. And if we look underneath the car now, you can see how smooth the underneath of it is. You can also see that little joggle I put in there. So one of the things I got today was a air random orbit sander. So I think I've mentioned before that my other sander, it's had a fairly hard life, and I think I've replaced the bearings in it at least 3 times. I've replaced the little springy plastic bit that makes it do the random orbit thing a couple of times as well. So I ended up buying a 6-inch sort of palm sander, this thing here, and it's got a sort of self vacuum hose on it, or you can hook it up to extraction. I just need to get some 6-inch stick-on pads, and then I can give that a try, and I'll use that to go over everything and when I'm building a body. But that looks nice. I think one thing I might do tonight, the final thing, I've just had a big clean up, so it's all back to normal again. I'm going to take off those diagonals and I'll put them in some evaporust and get some paint on those at some point. I have been considering what to do about the chassis paint. Do you go the full sort of etch prime 2K paint type thing? Do you use something like POR 15? I've used that stuff before. I don't really like it. There's another one which is KBS coating, which is a similar sort of thing. It's basically it's like a 1K thing that cures by moisture in the air, so it gives you a very tough coating, but I've not used that, and it's quite expensive. So I think I'm just going to go with the kill rust enamel, because that's what I did on my Austin 7, and it's actually now been quite a few years since I've painted it. It obviously hasn't had a hard life on the road, but I had a look underneath it today and the paint's fine. It's nice and tough. I don't need to worry about priming. It's already kind of etch primed anyway. It's got this red primer on it. And it's easy for me to get, and it's very easy to touch up if you need to. So I think that's probably what I'll go with. And this is what I mean about using the roller in a slightly unusual way. I need to increase the curve on here, so I've got it back in there, clamped down hard so it doesn't move, and then I can just hammer this around that bottom roller. The other thing I did yesterday actually was reassemble the radiator shell. Still not convinced with the colour, but that's okay. It's kind of shiny because of the clear coat on it, but the main thing is I much prefer this new stone guard. I think I made a much better job of it the second time around, and it's much nicer with just a straight bottom edge. There's just enough clearance in front of the dynamo. One of the things I need to do is look at the dynamo, because I did have it charging when it was off the car, but that was a couple of years ago. So I may need to reflash the coils in it and check if it still works. There was nothing wrong with it. It was all mechanically correct. I'm pretty sure the last time I actually had it generating anything would have been in my old house, and we've been here 3 years now, so it might need reflashing, and then I can try it again. But, yeah, I'm pleased with how that undertray's come out, and it means the last little bit of tail will be on the body, so that'll be part of the skin. It's probably a good place to finish up. The only other thing is I'm still playing with this GoPro, of course, but now that I've got it, one thing I may do is strap it to the bike, and now that I've got a proper helmet for this and proper gloves, I can take it for a ride over my neighbour's field. He keeps saying to me, oh, bring it over, bring it over. He used to be he didn't have one of these bikes, but he used to be into trials riding way back when, apparently. And he did say one of the national events was actually held across the road in their farm at some point. So I'll take it over there sometime. The other annoying thing about having a new camera is I now need a new workflow for editing and uploading films. I've always used Windows Movie Maker and it's always worked fine. Very simple, but it does everything I need because I don't put a lot of effort into editing. But it won't play the type of file that the GoPro produces. So I need to play around with other editing software and try and find something that's quick and easy to use and preferably free.